So marine parks are new. We've heard a lot about what's been going on, but they're also new to our punters. They're new to the whole community. They're a new responsibility for people to have to deal with, and they're a new responsibility for us, for Juna, to deal with. Good things about new responsibilities, I guess, is you get to plan them right from the start. You don't bring any baggage with you. It's a clean slate. So for marine parks compliance, we had a clean slate, and so we set about developing a strategy first up at the highest level. Strategy has 3 guiding principles, which you can see up there: education, enforcement, and review and monitoring. Now, that's standard compliance sort of strategy. It's based pretty much on how people act. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the Braithwaite Pyramid, but if you take the Braithwaite Pyramid, that's a group of people. Let's call you people. Let's call it 100 of you sitting up there. 72 of you got out of bed this morning and went out, and you're going to comply with things that you do all day. You're going to be happy, smiling, complying. 20 odd of you, 24 maybe, you got out of bed and you're like, yep, it's all good. No one's looking, sweet. I'll just non-comply a little bit while no one's looking. And 4 of you got out of bed this morning and thought, yeah, excellent, I'm going out to non-comply. I'm not going to point out which 4 it is, but Henry, Simon, that's 2. We'll leave the other 2 as a mystery. So, first thing we have to do is focus on all those people, the 72% that are going to comply. And we do that by education and awareness. And in our strategy, we've got provide this information, and there we've got how we're going to do it. And there we've got how we did it, or how we do it at the moment. So we've spent 2 years since 2012 leading up to the implementation of fishing restrictions at the end of 2014. Almost a grace period, if you like, but an education period. And during that period, we got a lot of this sort of information underway. The Rec Fishing Guide, 380,000 copies have been printed and distributed. So there's only, what, 1.5 million people in the state, and we've distributed 400,000 copies. Signage, we went with a whole suite of new signs around the state. Started with 92, now we're up to about 104 because we're tweaking it as we're going along, finding where we need to put more in. We've got 2 apps on the go. Recently we're focusing on the PIRSA Rec Fishing app, where we've had the marine parks part of it built into the app, so you can look at the app and it'll tell you whether you're near or in a sanctuary zone. And the GPS part of your phone works even if you're out of mobile phone service. Now we're a couple of years in, the new chart software packages that people use on their boats or their phones or their iPads also include the marine park's boundaries. Moving on from that, the next step is about creating deterrence. And the first thing to do is to evaluate and define your priorities for the parks. Scientists have already mentioned here we've got 83 areas to look at, in particular sanctuary zones. That's a lot of areas to look at, so how do we decide what we're going to do and where we're going to do it? We're using a pretty simple risk assessment process to come up with a compliance priority for each zone. And when you make this PowerPoint, you think, oh, no one's going to be able to read that, but in this lecture theatre you probably actually can. It's terrific. So there it is, consequence, likelihood, and so we come up with a non-compliant activity risk, and then we look at a few more things. We also look, is it a key monitoring site? We have a commitment to do targeted compliance where it's most important that the scientific monitoring sites are. We have a look at visitation, and we have a look at incidents, offences, if you like, incidents that have been reported in the year before. The way that process pans out is something like that. So pick one right in the middle, Coorong Beach South. Have a look. When we did the workshop processes, we came up with what we thought the non-compliant activities were. Wreck fishing from the shore, scale fish, maybe commercial rock lobster. We have a look, the visitation, we give it a low, medium or high, just based in the region. So it's low visitation for the Coorong Beach South. We have high incidents. Now we're 18 months in, so we've got 12 months worth of data about what incidents we're going to get. We have high incidents there, so it becomes a high priority zone for us. There's other ways it could become a high priority zone. Cape Dombey in the middle there too. There's no incidents reported there, but it's very high visitation. Lots of visitors there all the time. It's also a key monitoring site, so it's a high priority for us from a compliance perspective as well. Just to satisfy your curiosity, if you had a look around the state, the 83 zones, that's how often the different potential non-compliant activities popped up when we did the workshop process around the regions. Not saying one's worse than the other, it's just simply the frequency of how often they came up across those sanctuary zones. And that gives us a zone priority rating, compliance rating, just where we're going to focus our interest. And if we've got 12 high priority zones in this year's rating, interesting there is offshore Ardrossan. It's the only zone in the whole state that ranked to 4 in our compliance prioritisation. And then you'll see lots in Encounter Marine Park, which you might expect, where you have a lot of people close to those important sites like Aldinga Reef. So, what have we done? The third strategy is that we monitor what we do so we can change it in the future. So, a lot of people here might be interested in, well, it's new marine parks, what has actually happened out there? This is what has happened up to date. So you've got 2 columns there, last year, financial year, and this year. And it's a couple of interesting things there. You'll see that the reports that we're getting, information reports, they'd be incidences for us. So they could come from a member of the public reporting non-compliance, they could come from one of our officers, they could come from the Fish Watch hotline or something like that. So last year we had 152, this year already, and we're not through the year yet, we're up to 260. We got our risk assessment process, so then we went out and patrolled it, which is what we do. So last year you can see that's 1,567 shore patrols, 82 boat patrols and 15 aerial patrols. In blue next to that you'll see what we've done this year. Most of our junior staff, rangers, wardens, shore-based. During the design process, a lot of sanctuary zones are adjacent to national parks. So there's a lot of shore patrolling that gets done, but also boat patrolling and aerial patrolling. And I've added a comment underneath there just about digital patrols. Digital patrols are just ways that we're using things like time-lapse cameras to keep an eye on areas that we can't be at every day. That sort of technology is getting quite cheap and disposable almost, so that we can use those things to keep an eye on sanctuary zones even if we're not there. So those are the incidents. What's been the outcomes? The outcomes are education letters or they're formal warnings. In the Marine Parks Act, we're required for the most common offence, which is wrecked line fishing in a sanctuary zone, we're required to give someone a warning. We cannot give an expiation on the spot fine until that person has been previously warned. So that's what you see up there. You'll see that we issued quite a few formal warnings, 142 so far this year. The number in the brackets after that is the number of repeats. So we've got 1. We've had 1 repeat offender so far this year who was formally warned and then has offended again. Underneath that you'll see expiations. The requirement for a formal warning does only apply to that particular offence, which is recreational hook and line fishing in a sanctuary zone. There are potentially other things that you could do where warning is not required and you could be expiated in the first instance. That could be something like spearfishing or dropping rock lobster pots or a few other things like that. So there are some expiations there. And then probably most interesting of all, there's 23 prosecutions last year and 6 on the go at the moment this year, but I've labelled them HSA because they're all under the Historic Shipwrecks Act. And that's not directly marine parks related, but yes it is, because that sanctuary zone there, the offshore Ardrossan sanctuary zone, also is an interesting spot because of the historic shipwreck that's within it. That's the Upper Gulf St Vincent Marine Park, and it's got some interesting lines on the map there. I haven't got the pointer. Where's the pointer? Which button do I press? Top one? Oh. Back. Top one. There it is there. The marine park boundary was drawn straight across the Gulf across there. And sitting right there is the Zanoni historic shipwreck. When we went to the community during the zoning process, or the internal zoning process, the community said, we want the sanctuary zone over the Zanoni. You need to change the boundary. So that's what we did. Went back to Parliament, got an amendment to the boundary. The sanctuary zone now sits in that area there, with the Zanoni shipwreck reserve sitting inside it. So the Zanoni has been a shipwreck reserve for 30 years, but from 18 months ago it was inside a Marine Park Sanctuary Zone, so we had to take some more responsibility for that. This is not the Zanoni, but this is the best picture I could get of it. And when you're thinking about looking at shipwrecks, it's nice to have a look at what they looked like before they sank. I mean, the Zanoni was an awesome vessel, quite a big vessel, 300 tonnes, 3 masts. It sank in Upper Gulf St Vincent. No one found it for over 100 years. It sat there undisturbed. And then eventually it was publicly known about anyway, at least, and about 30 years ago, and protected. It has a protected zone around it, 550 metres. You cannot enter that zone. Reason being, you can see an example there, when you drop an anchor on it or fishing gear, it's a wooden shipwreck, it damages the shipwreck. So that zone you're required to have a permit to enter into that zone. That's the view from a helicopter aerial patrol approaching that shipwreck early last year. The red dot in the middle is the target for the laser-guided missile. Oh wait, the red dot in the middle is the location of the shipwreck. So in that one photo, the compliance officer has got 11 boats that are violating the protected area, and the Zanoni is not only a historic and cultural artefact. If it was just a cultural artefact, we'd look after it under the Marine Parks Act because that's part of our role. But it's also obviously a shipwreck in the middle of a soft sediment bottomed gulf. It's a little key biodiversity hotspot as well. So there's extensive non-compliance at the Zanoni. So the response from us has been a reactive one, yes, but involving media, involving more patrolling, involving new signage, involving outreach days at boat ramps, giving information to people launching that we think might be going there, head to the Zanoni. As I've said, we've had 23 people through the courts already and a few more recently, but the good thing about that is it's a good little case study because you can see that your compliance works. Now, compliance, some people enjoy compliance, some people don't. I get that. But you know the good thing about compliance? It's a win-win. If you're in that helicopter going out there to have a look for that and you see that, that's a win. Trust me, David Pearce was in the helicopter. That was a win for him. He enjoyed that greatly. But if you go out there in the helicopter, and the last patrol we did out there was in Easter in a boat, the last boat patrol in Easter went out there, they saw nothing. That's a win too, because that's the outcome that we want. So either way, compliance, you get a win. You either get someone there and you can start creating a deterrent, or there's no one there and you're doing your job. So that's sort of a snapshot of compliance in the first year or two for marine parks. What we're doing is learning as we go about different locations. We're learning about what happens in different places, building our intel if you like. We're also learning about methodology, aerial patrols, boat patrols, the different things we have to do to get the best outcomes from each of those methods of operations. But we have established a foundation for encouraging compliance based on this strategy, and we're monitoring and reviewing it and improving it as we go. Thanks very much. Any questions? Tim?
Thanks, Andy. Any questions? Patricia? Thank you.
I knew it, Patricia.
I have to ask one now. Thanks for that, Andy. I'm just thinking about the key two roles of the compliance program. Which one is the regulatory compliance, which is basically you're going to check if people are obeying the regulations, the law, right? And the other side is the compliance that will help us to understand if we are achieving the ecological outcomes because people haven't been fishing in that area, and we know that because we're doing the compliance. And they don't necessarily relate at the same site because we don't expect ecological outcomes at that level for all the zones. So I'm just wondering, how does the program, with the limited resources, balance out those needs?
I'm not quite sure I exactly got what you want me to answer, Patricia, but yeah, we have. I understand the point is that we need to know there's compliance so we can feed that into the monitoring evaluation.
Yes.
Yes. All I can say is that we get the best information we can about compliance. You're never going to get 100% compliance, I wouldn't think. Even at Zanoni, we've had a pretty strong effort there, and people know that we are working there. So, for example, on Easter, it's a busy weekend, there was no one there because the messages got out. But there's still going to be boats there, so there's still going to be non-compliance.
I just saw on your risk assessment table there was one on the ecological side that I thought was pretty good when you go through your criteria. Yeah, well, the fact that monitoring is going to take place there boosts it up in our prioritisation, and then that prioritisation feeds into the regional compliance plan. If it comes out a high or a medium, then we put more effort towards that area. We have limited resources, so that prioritisation helps us focus where we need to.
Danny, quick one.
Andy, of the total warning, what percentage is made up by the Zanoni?
In the